Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending December 24th, Christmas Eve. One more week after this of 2022, and we are done with it. Never to be seeing it again, although I'm sure we'll be feeling the effects of it for a while. But as far as the year goes, it is over. You can't redo it. Moving on to the next year, which is it's kind of exciting as we move on to this stage where the year ends and then a new year begins, and it's always full of possibilities and stuff like that. But it's pretty scary too, going into the unknown, especially after the last few years. I think it's just been rough on everybody. So best thing that I can say about all of that is to accept what has happened and still continue to have hope for the future, and of course make goals to help you reach your potential as much as humanly possible. And whatever's going on in the world, don't let it stop you, or try really, really hard not to let it stop you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started as we always do with Aries, and we have Jupiter officially moving back into Aries this week, and moving in from 29 degrees Pisces at the beginning of the week to 0 degrees Aries by the end of the week. So you're definitely feeling the full effects of everything that Jupiter has to offer. First of all, focus is on self this month, and with Jupiter influencing that focus on self, as Jupiter's coming into your sign, actually, he's coming in right on the cusp of focus on self, as well as that inner closet. This inner closet place is really pretty much a place where we keep a whole bunch of our trauma and a whole bunch of our emotional stuff that we just can't deal with. We stuff it all in this closet, and we all have one. Some of us have a closet that doesn't have a lot of stuff in it, and some of us have a closet that if you open the door, everything would just come tumbling out. And trust me when I say that those times when everything comes tumbling out are really not pleasant, especially for those of us that like to stuff that closet to jammed full. Unfortunately, every year we each of us signs get to go through this let's check out our secret closet place, which tends to, when the focus on is on that, you tend to find yourself dealing with triggers from past traumas. So for instance, behaviors from people that you've had issues with before that seem to trigger bad behaviors from the past. There's also an element of situations that emotionally trigger past traumas, childhood traumas. They have nothing to do with the trauma, but the feeling is the same. And when that happens, a lot of times we tend to allow that emotional reaction to take over how we deal with the situation. And in some cases, that's just not a good idea. I mean, think about it. If you grew up with a narcissistic parent and you have a lot of triggers over the way that narcissistic people tend to manipulate other people, and then all of a sudden you have been at this job for 10 years and a new boss comes in with those same tendencies, you don't want to emotionally react in that situation. It is definitely not going to work out very well for you. So you have to learn how to basically work the trigger, if that makes sense. So you have the trigger, and then you realize you're having an emotional response. You take a few moments to understand the emotional response, to put the emotional response aside for just a moment so that you can clearly focus on what you're dealing with at hand. Because this is on the cusp of the house of self, that adds an interesting element to it, because most of the time these triggers are coming up. Let's look at this closet for what it is. If it was a closet in your house that was stuffed with junk that you didn't want to open the door because as soon as you did, everything would fall out, you know that you need to clean it. You know that there's just old stuff in there that you've been holding on to forever that you haven't seen in 10 years. Why continue to hold on to it? Why continue to hold on to it? You want to go in there every so often and take the things out and go, okay, I haven't seen this. I have no attachment to it anymore. Or I do have an attachment, it's a negative attachment. I should get rid of it, right? And the more you get rid of, the more space you have to fill with things that maybe do bring you joy. And that's really what it comes down to. It's exactly the same with the emotional closet. And as you clean it out, you become a stronger individual. You're now not triggered as often. Trust me when I say emotional growth is a lifetime thing. And so it's not going to happen overnight, but you still start to feel a little bit freer, a little bit more powerful, a little less stressed. All of these things are going to benefit you in some way. So is it challenging? Yes. However, Jupiter is all about growth and expansion. And cleaning out this closet is part of your personal growth and expansion. It's all about becoming a stronger person than you were yesterday. And that is not an easy process, but I guarantee you it is a process. And in the end of it, it just feels wonderful. I can't even describe how it feels. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Taurus. We continue to have Uranus and Taurus. I mean, obviously, and Uranus continues to be retrograde this week. I think we get a couple more weeks of that retrograde and then it is over. So that is good. We continue to have that square with Saturn, and we're currently focused on the past. Saturn's focus is still on that inner closet. Let me just say, from an Aquarius, which is where Saturn is, to a Taurus, I have found that in working with some of my Taurus colleagues, that this has been a really rough one for both sides, for both parties, in terms of the way that these planets have been lining up with each other. And the fact that Saturn is focused on that inner closet, a lot of triggers have been coming up on both sides because you're focused on the past and you're focused on your triggers. So basically, we're talking about trauma that is being triggered from past experiences. And in many cases, as I've gone through the last couple of weeks with this particular situation and scenario, it has not been pleasant. It is big stuff. We're not talking little triggers. We're talking like, let's get deep down into the root of your trauma. And that is such a difficult thing to go through in just the last few weeks. As a matter of fact, I really felt that sort of deep trauma root sting, and literally have spent a week trying to process this because there's just so much of it in many cases. And so it does make it difficult. It's like I wouldn't say you have to stop your entire life, but your entire life revolves around this problem and revolves around your feelings and revolves around every single thing that you do. And unfortunately, it takes the energy out of what you're doing too. So it can take a short amount of time to process this, or it can take an extremely long amount of time. Now, when I say I've been going through this for a week, okay, what I'm saying is that I have done two things. Okay. One, I have been trying to put it on the side to focus on other things, which doesn't obviously get rid of it. It keeps coming up. So I'm not dealing with it when I just need to deal with it so I can move on. That's number one. And number two is that I also, in this particular instance, have a really hard time letting go of my anger over the situation. And that is really powerful. And I think that that's where most people really get hung up, is letting go of how angry they are at another person in order to clear the way to see the lesson for us. And that is also a step that as human beings, we either avoid or miss every single time. So while we're going through this, and obviously we're going through it for another week, maybe week and a half, but we're almost out of it. It's really important to understand why these triggers are coming up, where they're coming from. Are they actually coming from the individual in front of you, or are they coming from someplace really, 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 really far away, really deep down inside there, where this particular individual is just triggering something that you have been going through? Now, two things. One, you're responsible for your triggers, and you're responsible for processing those triggers for your own healing. The individual is not responsible for not triggering you. It's your trigger. It doesn't necessarily mean that that person is doing it on purpose. That does happen, but not in all situations. So you also want to be aware of, is he triggering me on purpose, or she? I'm sorry. Didn't mean to just blame men here, okay? That's not what I'm trying to do. Is he or she doing it on purpose? Or is this just something that they're doing and they're not aware that they're doing? And even if you say something along the lines of, that's a trigger for me, please don't say it again, there would be a really good reason for it, if that makes sense. And we're going to take way too long if I get more into that. So this is a little bit of a challenge. The good news is that Uranus is lining up with Venus and Mercury in a trine, because both are in Pluto and they're focused on career. Now, this is kind of funny when you think about it, but it's actually perfect, especially for those uber career-oriented Tauruses I know, and I know quite a few of them. First of all, this healing does help you to expand in your career, because it does take away of the blocks that we ourselves put up there in front of us, number one. Number two, there is something in this release and this healing that also seems to, there's some creativity that seems to stem from it. And the fact that Venus is very much involved in this sort of heightens that creativity. So you may find, looking back at different ideas that you had in terms of career growth in the past, you may actually find yourself finding inspiration from the past and then come up with some creative ideas to bring it to now, or even to project it into the future. So just because you're going through something doesn't mean that it's going to completely destroy everything around you. That's also part of that lesson. Okay, so that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Gemini, continue to have Mars in Gemini, and that retrograde also continues through this week. I think we have a couple of more weeks left of this retrograde, and then it is over as well. We're actually down to 2 retrogrades period, so it'll be nice to have a bit of a retrograde break there for a while. Mars influence continues to be on how you process information or how you think. And we know, of course, Geminis are really big thinkers, tending to think on multiple lines at any given time. Mars has a very sort of aggressive energy in some ways. And when that energy is retrograded, I feel like, let me just put it this way. To me, this feels like normally your thoughts are projected out in terms of things that you need to do. But Mars retrograde sort of brings that aggression into the self. And so I feel a lot of maybe stinking thinking going on at this time, which is not helping you get through different situations, if that makes sense. The biggest obstacle of all is yourself, more than anybody else. Now, we can point the finger at a billion people. There's always going to be plenty of people that we can blame our failures on, for lack of a better word. But really, ultimately, it comes down to us. It comes down to how much we want it. It comes down to how much work we're willing to put into it. And it comes down to how tough are we really willing to be in order to get what we want. I'm not necessarily saying being mean to people, but I mean, in some cases, we've seen historically that that's been a part of it also. We make a personal choice on how we're going to deal with that too, obviously. I'm not condoning mean behavior, by the way. So this could be a big problem. And then when we get to Wednesday and the moon moves into opposition with Mars, this becomes a much bigger problem because now we're adding the moon, we're adding some emotions to it. So stinking thinking towards yourself on an emotional level, especially around the time that you should be focusing on your goals for next year. And it just sort of has you in this very dark place in your mind. Now, you are absolutely 100% responsible for that place, whether you stay there, what happens there, if you get yourself out of there. And I know it's really hard, and especially around this time of the year for a lot of people, it is really difficult to get yourself out of that space. But at the same time, I feel that we all individually know the steps that we need to take in order to move past this space. A lot of times we refuse to use them. And if you don't know, it is definitely a good idea to try different things that can help get you out of that space. Me personally, it's walking. When I'm sedentary for too long and there's no exercise and I get caught up in my head and I'm usually sitting in the dark somewhere, and I need air. I need to clear the cobwebs. I need blood running, flowing through me. Those types of things really help me to sort of clear my head and be able to focus again. So that works for me. It may not work for you, but try different things, try new things, try go out of the box and try things that you haven't tried before to help clear that out so that you can focus on what you need to do. If you are feeling like you're stuck in like an emotional tornado, you need to sit down and understand what the root of that tornado is, and kind of sort of work through those emotions a little bit. The more you avoid trying to work through those emotions, the longer this is going to take. Take it from another air sign who doesn't like dealing with emotional crap. The longer I put it off, the longer it is a problem. So if you just eliminate the problem now, it does make things easier. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Cancer, focus is on the home this week, which is actually probably perfect for Cancers. Their little crab shell, their little space that they love to be in and kind of sort of hide in, and they get all comfy in there. We have the dark moon, also referred to as the Lilith, which is influencing Cancer, as well as Pallas Athene continues to influence Cancer, although Pallas Athene's focus is on those you love. So it brings sort of an element of that into it. Now, we have the holidays. Let's just go with the easy answer here. Cancers are very nurturing, caretaking types of people. So we're getting into the holiday. I see this as decorating the home, creating the space for those that you love to have this really wonderful festive season. And that of course that comes with all the cooking and all the baking and all the things, that we do to make the holidays magical for the people that we love. I do want to add in a little warning, and actually I'm going to take this from something that I just watched. I just watched A Bad Mom's Christmas on Netflix, and it was hilarious. It was dirty as hell, okay, but it was hilarious. But I love the concept of these women saying, you know what, I'm taking Christmas back because I just can't deal with the anxiety and the stress of the perfection of Christmas anymore. And I loved that concept. And I feel that it's very appropriate for you guys this week to pay attention to making sure that you are not spending so much energy to make things perfect for everybody else that you're ignoring yourself. A lot of times we human beings fall into this trap, and it's a kind of a silly trap when we think about it, but it's a very common trap. We do this stuff for other people so that they see how wonderful and how much you love them, and we expect them to treat us in the same way, and it never happens. Not saying that it's never going to happen, but it never happens for two reasons. One, the way they treat us is the best they can do, and we're asking too much of them. Or the way that they treat us is well, but you're not identifying it as the exact same way. Or 3, they just don't give back what you put into it. And that happens a lot too. The point is, it's wonderful to spend your energy on others and making them happy. And of course, we want to continue to do that, but not to the detriment of ourselves either. Make sure that when you're doing all of these things to make everybody happy around you, that you are also creating something that makes you happy and doing something for you, even if that means a little bit of spoiling. I am a big fan buying myself Christmas presents, just saying. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Leo, focuses on your day-to-day schedule this week. And of course, we're the week before Christmas here, so I'm sure that there's a whole lot of stuff on your schedule, especially you Leo ladies out there just running around, getting everything done. And, again, it's that perfection thing, especially since, of course, we're focused on your day-to-day schedule, and there's a little bit of an element of those you love in there as well. At the same time, though, I feel that it is really important to take some time to focus on not just getting those wonderful things done for the holiday, but also making sure that you're getting other things done that you need to be getting done as well. Not to say that you Leos put things off, okay? But I do feel that every fixed sign is a procrastinator in some way. Not to say that the other modes aren't procrastinators, but fixed signs, I'm one, I'm your opposite. We definitely put things off. So I feel that it is very much an appropriate time to take this week and maybe even a little bit of next week to get yourself organized and ready to go, and just to make sure that you have either completed things that needed to be completed, or that you're at least working on them so that there is a completion later on. Also, I feel that coming up this week, it's sometimes those we love are not always the easiest people to get along with, if that makes sense. We all have those family. Some of us have more than others, but I feel that a lot of Leos are kind of going through this cycle. At least a lot of the Leos that I have talked to anyways are going through this cycle, and it's like purge, if that makes any sense. That word was from on high, by the way. It's a purge to really look at these relationships and determine whether or not it really is necessary to keep these relationships going. In some cases, it's really hard to actually sever the relationship completely, depending on the relationship, of course, and the family dynamic. But in other cases, I'm seeing a lot of Leos going through this. Why am I even dealing with this person anymore? I'm pretty much over it. There's no reason for me to keep doing it, and just kind of sort of check them out of their lives, sort of a thing. So I kind of feel that this week coming up is a thing also to pay attention to. And while cutting people like that out of your life can be difficult, it's a difficult decision. I think the difficulty is more in the decision than what happens after you make the decision. After you make the decision, most of the time it feels great because you're not dealing with this negativity over and over and over again. But there is still a lot of guilt there, and take the time to process the end of this relationship also, so that you can kind of move on from it, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it just drags on forever and ever and ever, and who wants that, right? So that's what I have for you guys. And I am going to move on to Virgo. We are focused on our day-to-day schedule this week, Virgos. Actually, there's quite a few Virgos that I know that are in the process of doing that right now. Ceres is moving out of your sign this week completely. In fact, it starts off right on the cusp and then officially moves out of your sign by the end of the week. That maternal, nurturing sort of influence seems to be leaving you. That doesn't mean it's not coming back. I don't know off the top of my head when Ceres goes retrograde, but it could go retrograde and come back in. As we sort of feel this influence leaving, I almost get the feeling of leaving the nest, if that makes sense, as if you're leaving the protection of your mother, so to speak, or whatever that comfort zone protection is. And I sort of feel that this is really a thing for you guys this week specifically, is these things that are coming up that are sort of pushing you out of that comfort zone or pushing you out of your comfortable place in order to actually move into focusing on something that you want to do specifically. I think with Virgos, I mean, I've known a lot of Virgos in my life, and they're some of my favorite people, actually. I don't act like that with most of them, but they really are some of my favorite people because they're so much fun. But one of the things that I have noticed in all of those Virgos that I know is that they really are great at planning. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Blah, 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 blah. But a lot of them are not really all that great at the follow through. And the follow through is so important. Being an earth sign, it's all about the follow through. And I've seen all of these Virgos that I'm referring to on both sides. The idea, follow through, bam, done. Watch them go because you're looking at their dust. They're already gone, kind of a thing. And then I've seen the other side of it where it's too much in here and not enough actually getting your hands dirty and getting it done. This week, it's important really to be paying attention to where you're dreaming or where you're planning, because those are two different things, right? Your dream is good. Have a dream board. This is what I want to do. Not coming up with all the complications of how that's going to happen. Just boom, this is my plan. But then you have your short-term plans, your now plans, and what you need to do in order to achieve those short-term plans. And then, of course, doing the work, which is not necessarily a hard thing for Virgos. Virgos, out of all the signs of people that I know, Virgos are one of the hardest working signs, and they can't say they love it, but they love it, if that makes any sense. So in any case, yes, the comfort of your comfort zone is nice, and who wouldn't want to stay there? But I look at it this way. I schedule time in my comfort zone so that I give myself that comfort zone every single week. Every other day of the week, I have to get out of my comfort zone. And that one day that I get to stay in it, that is the reward for my hard work throughout the week. So think about it that way. And then you're not taking it away. You're just leaving it for a minute. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Libra, we're going to kick off this week with the moon in Libra just for one day, and then it moves on Monday. So obviously you probably dealt with it the end of last week too. This week, the moon moves into a square with Pluto. Libra's focus is on relationships this week, and Pluto's focus is on those that support you. And we know that sometimes those don't necessarily line up the way that we think they should line up for various different reasons. So this may cause a little bit of a challenge for you, especially if you're so focused on these people not being there that you're not focused on what needs to get done. The truth is that when it comes to our support systems, I feel I have one of the best support systems that anybody could possibly have in the world. And yet there are always those times where nobody's there to support me. It's timing in many cases. And to me, that's a lesson that this is not about who I can get to support me. This is about what I do to support myself at this particular point. So if you spend a little less time getting emotional about not having the support and a little more time about focusing on what just needs to get done, it will be a little bit easier for you. And you can always get mad about not having support later when you have more time. The moon does move into a grand sextile with Saturn and the sun at the same time. This is a much different aspect. It's actually a very helpful aspect. Saturn is focused on your inner closet, which is a little scary, and the sun is focused on your career. Very weird way of looking at things, especially with relationships being very much a part of all of this. When we talk about relationships, obviously we're not just talking about your spouse or the person that you love and want to spend the rest of your life with. We're talking about all relationships, and that can be family relationships, but that can be friends, acquaintances, work relationships. It encompasses all relationships. And in many ways, this trine between the moon and Saturn, it seems like a negative, because this can indicate that there are certain things being triggered from old past traumas that are being triggered by new relationships currently right now. So, for instance, something that was said by your parents that is a trigger when other people say it. For example, you don't really want to overreact to this, because obviously it's probably not the best time and place for that, especially when it all points to your career and how you shine in your career. But if you flip this a little bit and you look at it in a different way, I think that's where it's helpful, because Saturn is all about responsibility. Your inner closet, your past trauma, and your healing from that is absolutely your responsibility. It's not anybody else's responsibility. But at the same time, if you're seeing these old patterns within these relationships, there may be a reason why these triggers are coming up, is to show you that the outcome may be the same as it was in the past. So you might want to be watchful, just to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes with this current relationship that you did in the past, if that makes sense. Once that moon moves on out of there, things sort of calm down a little bit, and they're not quite so, oh my God, this is a thing. Giving you a little bit of time to really think about that relationship. It's not that you should run from a relationship like this, but you can put down boundaries. You can approach the relationship in a different way that you approached it before. And especially if this is a childhood trauma instance, you wouldn't have approached it as an adult because you're a child, but you are an adult now. And the child should not be driving the bus, especially when it comes to your career. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Scorpio. Focuses on finances this week. And Monday, the moon just moves right on into your sign to influence that. Give your finances an emotional influence, as if you really needed that, right? I think we all have an emotional influence when it comes to our finances these days right now. We're going to start off the moon moving into opposition with Uranus, which is focused on the past. Uranus is also retrograde. This tells me two things actually that can come up from this. One is that you're dealing with the same past problem with finances. So you're stuck in the same old BS that you've always been in, which is annoying. The other thing is that there's a possibility there of making past mistakes when it comes to finances. So for instance, if you've overspent and then gotten yourself in trouble and then sat there and thought, man, I shouldn't have spent all that money because I would have had the money to fix this car right now. If you avoid doing that again, you've learned from that. If you do it again, you're repeating past mistakes. So there's a little bit of an element of that in there as well. Because the moon is influencing this is an emotional thing. So I would say that what's really important to focus on here in terms of this opposition is just, I feel like if you don't learn a lesson the first time, it gets more and more emotional as you go along. So this could be one of those instances where it's a repeat one. The moon's sextile with that does look like Venus is actually a little bit helpful in terms of your career. So it's giving you some creative ideas on how to make a little extra money on the side, or maybe ideas on, how to get a raise or move forward in your career, different things like that. So that is kind of helpful. The moon actually moves into a grand sextile the very next day with Neptune, Jupiter, that looks like Mercury and Venus. They're all very close together right now. But in any case, Jupiter and Neptune are focused on that inner closet, and there is an element of focus on self on there. So again, we're triggering our inner trauma just a little bit, unfortunately. But and of course, Venus and Mercury are focused on career. Scorpio continues to be focused on money. This really is all about unraveling some of those mindsets, those old mindsets. Believe it or not, we pick up a lot of money mindsets from childhood. And I didn't think in a million years that we would, but the truth is that we do. How we are raised, how much access we had to money, how often we were taken shopping, how often we had full bellies or not full bellies. That does have an influence on your mindset about making money. So if you think that life is living paycheck to paycheck, you are always going to live paycheck to paycheck. Basically, that's the bottom line. So this is just helping you to kind of release some of those old money mindsets, so that you have a clearer picture of what your money goals are and what you need to do to achieve them and what you need to let go of, so it's not getting in your way. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving into Sagittarius. I almost sang a song about that, but that's okay. We'll leave that for next time. The moon moves into Sagittarius on Wednesday, moving into opposition with Mars as soon as it moves into your sign on Wednesday. Focuses on long-term goals, and that opposition with Mars, Mars's focus is on the mind and how the mind works. And of course, Mars is retrograde still right now. So this is actually going to create a bit of a challenge. I like to call it stinking thinking. I did not make that up. I heard it from somebody else. But stinking thinking to me is when you are basically mentally attacking yourself. And when you are trying to get your long-term goals together, when you're overthinking what needs to be done for each of those steps, when you're worried about what could happen, so you're over planning for that possibility. I mean, all of those things just really get in the way. You want to simplify it. Sit down with a piece of paper and say, I am here. This is where I want to be when I get here. And then fill in the middle of what you need to do to get there. And of course, the timing of that and things like that. When you simplify it that way, you just put it down on a piece of paper. Now, you know that you're going to be prepared for pretty much whatever comes up. And even if you think you're prepared, you're never prepared in many cases. It's like, I've heard this so many times from so many different people who have unfortunately watched an elder relative just slowly lose control of everything before they finally pass away. I mean, it's a very long process, and every single time I've heard somebody say, including myself, because I've actually said this myself, I've heard somebody say, I was always prepared for this because it had taken a long time. I knew it was going to happen, but when it happened, I wasn't prepared for it at all. You can never fully prepare, is what I'm trying to say, Sagittarius. You can never fully prepare for anything. So get out of your head and just put it down there and take a look at it, and then worry about each thing as it comes, instead of making it this crazy thing for yourself right now. As we move into Thursday, the moon does move into a square with Neptune and Jupiter, and both are focused on that secret closet. So we're talking about triggers coming up, specifically old triggers of past trauma. And a lot of times now, I love you, Sagittarians. Let me just start off with that, okay? I love you, Sagittarians, but I know how crazy every single one of you is, and in your own little way. And so, a lot of times when these triggers pop up, the emotional reaction from a Sagittarius is downright terrifying. And why would you want to terrify people? It is 100% up to you to process that trigger. Take a couple of seconds. That's all it takes to process that trigger. Understand it comes from somewhere else so that you're not handling what you're handling right now with the trigger. You're in charge, not the trigger. And then of course you can take the time to process the trigger later, which you should. Otherwise it's going to come up again. So outside of those couple of days where things get a little tiny bit hairy, it is a great time to really pay attention, to sit down and make sure that your goals for the coming year are all set and ready to go so that you know the direction that you're going in. And I think this is really important for the sign of Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is one of those signs, mutable signs, all mutable signs. They get very easily distracted. And before you know it, you got a plan in your head, and then it's like, oh, but look, there's a petting zoo. And it just happens. And then at the end of the year, you're like, oh crap, man. I mean, I literally got sidetracked through 2 weeks into the year and didn't get anything done. Write it down. That's all I got to say. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we are moving on to Capricorn, and let's go ahead and celebrate Capricorn season starting this week, woo-hoo, as well as the winter solstice on the very same day. As a matter of fact, the sun moves into Capricorn on Wednesday, joining Mercury and Venus, who are already there, and Pluto, who is at 27 degrees. Now, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. In the next couple of months, Pluto will leave Capricorn, and move on to Aquarius finally, but then go retrograde and come back. And that back and forth, like we're playing volleyball back and forth to each other, is going to happen for a few years before you can finally be rid of him. But at least you get a break this time. It's not going to happen in the next couple of weeks, though, but it will be happening in the next few months for sure. So we got a lot of action going on in Capricorn right now, with 4 planets, including the moon on Friday and Saturday, all in there. And what is beautiful actually about this is, again, because of where the other planets are, they're all really in very good places with, a lot of very helpful aspects with the other planets and very little of the negative. So of course, all planets are moving into a trine with Uranus, and also a sextile with Neptune and Jupiter. Neptune and Jupiter are focused on the secret closet. So they're in a space where a lot of triggers, unfortunately, could come up with in terms of past trauma. That doesn't sound like it's helpful, but it actually really is helpful. These triggers are coming up for a reason, because you've held on to it for a really, really, really long time, and it is time to let that go. Uranus is focused on the past. All of this, of course, is influencing your career, as Capricorn is focused on the career currently right now. You would think, thinking about the past, you would think that trauma triggers would not necessarily be helpful in terms of your career. But again, we're talking about releasing old mindsets, old trauma, in order to make space for new things that are actually helpful, things that you need to do, things that you want to do. If you're stuck, let me put it this way. I love my grandma. She's a Capricorn. She's going to be 90 in a week or so. One of the most amazing women I've ever known in my entire life. And she has never changed. She has literally never changed her mentality. She is responsible. She works. She takes care of all of her bills. She works. She's retired now, obviously. She has a pension. She had a union job. She did everything that she was supposed to do, but she never changed it. And therefore, yes, she's sitting good, because she stayed the course and stayed the same. But because she never made those changes, it did get really boring for her, even if she continued to do it. So this really is an opportunity actually to maybe release some of those things that do hold you back from making changes or taking a few risks in life, because occasionally we need to take risks in life, not because, well, without it, life is boring. Let me just put it that way. And my grandmother had said numerous times, as much as she enjoyed what she did, she kind of wished she went further with it, or maybe changed things up so that it wasn't such a humdrum thing every single day. So lots of energy going into that career right now in terms of your goals for next year and your career goals for next year. And I mean, really, the sky is the limit for you guys. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Aquarius. Of course, we continue to have Saturn in Aquarius. I mean, it's just a thing, right? That is actually going to end here in the next couple of months, and we will not have Saturn in our sign anymore, but in a few months, pretty shortly after Saturn leaves Aquarius, Pluto is moving into Aquarius. And we'll go retrograde and go back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn for a few years, honestly. And then we'll sit in Aquarius and be here forever for 18 to 25 years. So I'm looking at the potential of being 70 years old by the time Pluto leaves Aquarius. And that's a bit of a daunting prospect. But then again, maybe this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. You never know, right? Saturn's focus is on that secret closet, although as we're getting towards the end of the week, we're moving into focus on our support system, those that support us. We still are in that square with Uranus. Uranus is very much focused on the past right now. With that being said, when we're not feeling the support system, it may trigger some of those feelings of not being supported when we were younger also, especially if those feelings are attached to any sort of trauma responses. Again, a lot of people make the mistake that we Aquarians are not emotional people. It's just that's really not true. I mean, I am a very emotional person. I do not parade it around, which is probably why most people think that we're not very emotional people. They just don't see it very often because we are very private about it, and that's okay. This support issue, I know, has come up for me so many times, and I feel that I have one of the best support systems any single person can get. It's just that there are times when all of those people are not available to you, and you just kind of sort of have to deal with it on your own, or as the English say, get on with it, because this is what you got to do, right? It's annoying, but the fact that it triggers past issues, that's when it starts to get complicated, and you have to separate the past baloney from what you're dealing with right now. You can deal with the past trigger later, but right now, if you're going to get through what you needed the support for, you need to be focused on getting it done with or without that support, which is unfortunate. Outside of that, this week really feels like a chance to, I just have to say, the last few weeks being focused on that inner closet and Saturn being a part of that. I have to say, man, I mean, so there's been a lot of triggers. Okay. There's been some deep, 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 deep roots that have been triggered. There's been a lot of processing those triggers going on in the last few weeks. I'm happy to see that we're looking at the last week of that and we can move on to something else, because whether I'm an emotional person or not, I don't like it, period. I understand the need for it. I understand I am my own worst enemy when it comes from that. But this has been some pretty big stuff, and I'm glad to see the end of it. And I am sure that you guys are too. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And finally, we're moving on to a Pisces. Neptune continues to be in Pisces. Jupiter leaves Pisces officially this week, but still on the cusp. You will be feeling the effects of Jupiter for sure, as of course he is still in a little bit of a conjunction with Neptune, enough to where most of the planets that are aspecting Neptune are also aspecting Jupiter, but not quite enough that the two of them are actually helping each other out in any way, which is unfortunate. Focus is on our secret closet this week, and we're starting that, and I have complete and total, I really feel for you, I do, because being an Aquarius, I just went through this and it kind of sucked. Okay, not gonna lie, it kind of sucked, and I'm sure that in some cases it will suck for you. It sucks for everybody, but we all kind of do this focus at least once a year, or several times throughout our lifetimes. And when we don't clean out that closet, we have a lot more things triggering us than we need to. And that really gets in the way and slows us down quite a bit. We do have a sextile between Jupiter and Neptune with Venus, Mercury, Pluto, and the moon also joins that towards the end of the week. Now, sextiles are very helpful aspects, and we're looking at career right now. Now, it seems weird that your trauma would have a good effect on your career. Well, actually, you can go either way. For most people, it's a very negative effect on their career because they're allowing the trauma to be in the workspace. And of course, it's definitely not a place for it most of the time. But also, I think where it's helpful is by identifying different things, different fears that you've had in the past that have held you back from pursuing different careers. You can eliminate that as a problem. Understand that this happened last time, doesn't have to happen this time. Maybe you look to the past, look to see what mistakes you made, avoid making those mistakes this time, do a little bit more research this time. As we get older, we get wiser. And that's what it comes down to, is you want to use your wisdom, not your 20-year-old brain that really didn't know a damn thing, right? Just because something didn't work out then doesn't mean that it's not going to work out now, type of a thing. Now, both planets are also in a square towards the end of the week with the sun right as it moves into Capricorn, right around the winter solstice. That is a little bit of a challenge when we're talking about how your triggers are holding you back from your career goals. So it's like, here's the problem, here's the solution, right? And I kind of look at it this way. We humans, we do everything we possibly can to get in our own way. And may not seem like it, we may not realize that we're doing it, but we do everything we possibly can to get in our own way. And we do that so that we don't fail, even though by doing that, we are failing. I know it doesn't make any logical sense, but nobody said humans made logical sense either. Bottom line is, if you can identify where you're doing that, you can also stop yourself. And it is scary and it is uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a really good idea either. So keep that in mind when you're making the big decisions. And that's what I have for you guys this week. And that is what I have for everybody this week. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. Make it a great week, everybody.